The morning Vivian Hale called me a parasitic hoarder on live television was the moment I stopped letting other people define me. She stood knee-deep in my spring screaming about how I was destroying the community, her designer suit dripping wet, her voice cracking like a power line in a storm. Cameras were rolling, reporters were everywhere, and I remember thinking this woman really has no idea who she's talking to. So I pulled out my phone, hit a number I hadn't dialed in months, and said, "Hey, Uncle Raymond, you might want to turn on Channel 6. The woman you've been investigating for federal grant fraud just confessed on live TV." The look on her face when she heard Uncle Raymond, man, that alone was worth every second of the hell she'd put me through. My name's Owen Mercer. A few years ago, I was a geochemist. Yeah, one of those guys who gets excited about rocks and groundwater tables. Then one bad day in a lab changed everything. A chemical reaction went sideways, killed my research partner Leah, and burned half the skin off my back. I got out alive, but I didn't feel alive for a long time after that. The guilt ate me whole. Every beeping monitor in the hospital sounded like the lab alarm from that day. Every mirror reminded me that she was gone, and I was still here. When my therapist, Dr. Natalie Rhodes, told me about this weird inheritance opportunity from a man named Theodore Vancourt, I thought it was some kind of pity setup. He'd left a 50-acre property in the Blue Ridge foothills, complete with a natural spring so clear you could see the pebbles sparkle underwater. The catch was I had to live there for 2 years and protect it from development. It sounded more like exile than therapy, but I took it. The spring was called Crystal Hollow, and for a while it healed me. I rebuilt my skin, rebuilt a bit of my mind, and for the first time in years, I didn't hear the explosion every time I closed my eyes. Then she arrived, Vivian Hale, president of the Oak Ridge Meadows HOA, self-proclaimed guardian of environmental justice. Picture a woman who's never set foot on dirt unless it's imported and leveled by landscapers. Platinum hair, perfect suits that tone people use when they think their job title makes them smarter than you. She'd been a lobbyist for big greenwashing firms before taking over the HOA, and her latest scam was the Ancient Waters Conservation Project. It sounded noble until you realized she was applying for $500,000 in federal conservation grants using my spring as the centerpiece. Her plan: claim my water was a shared community resource pocket, the grant money, and use environmental laws to seize my property. All she needed was for me to play the villain. The harassment started small: a fine for unauthorized water containment. Then fake inspectors showed up snapping photos and collecting samples. I called the county, no one had sent them. A week later, her Facebook group, Save Our Streams, accused me of causing downstream flooding and hoarding water that rightfully belonged to the community. Hundreds of angry comments from strangers who'd never been within 50 miles of my land. It was psychological warfare dressed up as environmental concern. Then one afternoon, a woman from the health department appeared with an official-looking clipboard and told me my spring was contaminated. I handed her lab results, proving it was cleaner than bottled water. She stammered and admitted she was a private contractor. That's when I installed cameras, motion sensors, floodlights, the works. Within days, they caught Vivian's people sneaking onto my property at night, measuring water flow, taking soil samples, even drilling into the limestone. They weren't just harassing me. They were building a case to steal from the federal government, and they were dumb enough to document it. What Vivian didn't know was that my godfather, Raymond Thornfield, happened to be the county commissioner overseeing the state's environmental fraud task force. For 2 years, he'd been tracking a network of fake conservation projects, siphoning millions from federal grants. EcoVision Solutions. Vivian's consulting firm was already on his radar. When I showed him the footage, he smiled that quiet, dangerous smile of his and said, "Let's not stop her. Let's let her talk." So we did. Vivian announced a massive community meeting to unveil her conservation project. She invited reporters, county officials, and environmental activists, an audience of about 150 people. The plan was for her to humiliate me publicly, spin her lies, and secure final approval for her fake grant. What she didn't realize was that half the attendees were undercover federal agents wearing body cameras. That night, the community center looked like a TED Talk hosted by the devil herself. Projector screens, maps, fancy charts, all built with stolen data from my files. Vivian strutted onto the stage, smiling like a televangelist. This project, she said, pointing to my spring on the big screen, will provide clean water for generations. The HOA has already secured $500,000 in federal funding to preserve this natural treasure. The audience clapped. Reporters scribbled. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. Every fact she shared was my research twisted into a lie. Then came the Q&A. People asked softball questions until an older man in the back, my uncle though she didn't know, stood up and asked, "How did your HOA establish jurisdiction over privately owned water rights?" Vivian smiled like she'd rehearsed the answer. Environmental protection laws grant local organizations oversight when natural resources affect community welfare, she said smoothly. Total nonsense, but it sounded official enough for the crowd to nod along. That's when I stood. Every camera in the room turned. Before we talk about protecting resources, I said, shouldn't we discuss how your grant application lists false property ownership and fabricated community approval? You could hear the air leave the room. Vivian's smile twitched, her eyes darting. "And who are you exactly?" she demanded. "I'm the guy who owns the property you've been trespassing on," I said quietly. "And I've got footage, lab data, and county records proving every word you just said is a lie." Her face drained of color, but she tried to recover, attacking instead of backing down. "Mr. Mercer has been obstructing community progress and endangering our shared water resources," she snapped. That was her fatal mistake. Because that's when Uncle Raymond stood up calm as ever and said, "He's my godson, Ms. Hale, and you just confessed to federal grant fraud on live television." Silence. Every camera swiveled toward him. Federal agents flashed badges in unison surrounding the exits. Vivian froze mid-sentence as Agent Blackwell stepped forward with handcuffs. The same reporters who'd been praising her were now filming her arrest. Her perfect hair hung limp, her designer blazer wrinkled, her whole empire unraveling in front of her neighbors. And me, I just stood there staring at the woman who'd called me a parasite, realizing she'd built her entire life on the same poison she accused others of drinking. She got 8 years in federal prison for conspiracy and environmental fraud. Ecovision was dissolved. The HOA restructured under supervision. And a month later, I learned Theodore Van Court had left a surprise clause in his will, a $50 million conservation endowment activated only if I proved the spring was worth protecting. I guess I passed. That money became the foundation for real-work education programs, conservation labs, even guided tours where kids learn how fragile clean water really is. The fake conservation project Vivian invented became a real one, only honest this time. These days, when I sit on the porch overlooking that spring, coffee in hand, I think about how close it came to being destroyed by greed disguised as virtue. The water still flows at 3,000 gallons an hour, pure and clear, just like it did before any of us touched it. And every ripple reminds me that justice doesn't always roar. It trickles, it seeps, it carves through stone until it finds its level. Last week, I got a letter from prison. Vivian's handwriting, sharp, angry, proud, even in defeat. It said, "I could have done this legitimately." I didn't respond. I just framed it for the office. Because yeah, she could have. We all could have. But some people would rather steal the river than learn how to swim in it. So what do you think? Was justice served, or did everyone just get what they deserved in their own way? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one. And if you've ever had someone try to take what's yours under the banner of community, hit that like button. Because sometimes the best way to protect what's pure is to let the truth do what water always does, find its own way home.